I don't know exactly what year roller coasters began to change. Because when I was a little kid, you would just get in one of those cute little box cars, the metal handrail would come down, and you would start up this hill really slowly. You'd crank up this hill, and then when it crested, down you would whoosh and through some twists and turns, and it was all quite lovely, a little sense of speed and a lot of laughing. About the most dangerous thing you did was if you raised your hands up in the air when you went down the hill. I don't know what year they changed and became demon torture machines of light speed craziness, but I was then 27 years old, and I took a first date. I took this woman to a major amusement park. And I decided we'd go on a roller coaster, and I thought in the manner of the old patriarchy that she would become really scared and I could console her. And I would score some points, right? Well, we get into this thing that looked more like a space capsule, and this massive, foam-girded harness wrapped me up. And I didn't know what I was getting into, and it didn't take off slowly. It went out like a bat from hell, and it just started light speed doing 360s and loop-de-loops and upside down half the time. And I was terrified, and I was gripping onto that thing for my life. And when it came to the end, I got out of that capsule. I was soaked. I don't mean a little bit. I sweated so much, I was dripping soaked. A guy in the front of the line said, "Is there a water feature on this ride?" And my date looked at me and went, "Oh my." I'm not made out for Top Gun. You know, Maverick on Top Gun said, "I have a need for speed." I have no need for speed. Well, Jacob's life in the Old Testament is a roller coaster. It's filled with ups and downs and twists and turns. I start to sweat when I read about Jacob's life in the Bible. So buckle up. Let me just tell you how he gets to this point that he's at the river Jabbok. How does he get there? Well, remember with me that Jacob is the grandson of Abraham. There's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the three great patriarchs of our Bible. It was in chapter 12 that Abraham makes a covenant with God, that Israel becomes God's people. The whole story begins here. Jacob is his grandson. Remember that he was born a twin, and the Bible tells us that he and Esau, as twins, are literally wrestling in the womb to see who could be the first out, because if you're the firstborn son, you get the blessing. You get the inheritance. They're literally wrestling to see who can come out first, and the Bible tells us that Esau is born first, but Jacob is holding on to his heel, trying to pull him back. So his life takes an immediate drop. He's not the firstborn son. Jacob ends up being this young lad who likes to hang out in the tent, stay home. Esau is this dashing, athletic hunter, impetuous and big personality. Jacob conspires to steal Esau's blessing. He makes a bowl of porridge, and when Esau's coming back from a long hunting trip, he's hungry, and he goes, "Here, you can have this soup if you give me your blessing." Esau is an impetuous guy. He takes the food, sure, whatever. And then Jacob dresses up like Esau to trick his old dad, who can barely see or hear. Jacob is kind of sideways. He's sketch ethically. He goes in, he tricks his dad into giving him the blessing. And now it looks like his life is now on an upturn, but then suddenly Esau goes into a murderous rage, and so Jacob has to escape, and he heads off to ancestral lands, and it's on his way there that Jacob's ladder takes place. Do you remember that story? He falls asleep at Bethel and he dreams of this ladder that connects heaven and earth, and he sees angels ascending and descending. Jacob is morally ambiguous, but he's got some depth in him, some connection to God that is stunning. He's still trying to escape Esau. He finally makes it to his uncle's lands, Laban. And when he gets to Laban, Laban is standing there with his daughter Rachel, and Jacob immediately falls in love with Rachel. Says he wants to marry her. But Laban says, you have to work for me 7 years until you can marry her. All the twists and turns and ups and downs to Jacob's life. So he works 7 years, and then comes the wedding night, and Laban sends his daughter in late at night to consummate the marriage, and then when Jacob wakes up, it turns out it wasn't Rachel. Laban sent the other daughter, Leah, in there. We're in some weird patriarchal sex ethics going on here. I could still never believe it that people actually look to the Bible for sexual ethics. I still hear people today say that they've read in the Bible that it's wrong to be gay. It doesn't say that, by the way, but somehow in their interpretation. But you really want to follow ancient sexual ethics? I mean, now he's married to Leah, but he still wants Rachel. And so Laban says, work for me 7 more years. And so he works 7 more years. Now he marries Rachel. Now he's got 2 wives, plus he has handmaids, and he starts having kids with all of them. Don't follow the sexual ethics here. But Esau is still after him, so now we get to the river Jabbok. He's with his whole 2 wives, handmaids, whole family belongings. He knows Esau's coming after him, and Esau has 400 men. And so he does what you should do under potential attack. You divide the camps to protect one. He sends his wives and handmaids and belongings across the stream. He stays there for the confrontation. And then it's late at night. You have it in your hand. One of the most enigmatic passages in our whole Bible. It says that Jacob wrestled a man all night long, but then by the end of the text, it says that he saw God face to face. So did he wrestle a man, or was he wrestling God? And then later in another point of the Bible, it says it was an angel. So is it a man or an angel, or is it God? It's mysterious. But after this wrestling match, he's a changed man. He's a better person. He reconciles with Esau. He has other problems in his life, but by the end of the biblical story, Jacob is the one that protects his whole family, brings everyone together into right relationship. Something changed him in that wrestling match. I think he was wrestling with himself. He had not been an upstanding person. He had been a lot about himself. Getting what he wants is what mattered. I think we have an existential confrontation here at the river Jabbok, where Jacob is wrestling with his own ego, his self-definition. I think the biggest wrestling match you'll ever have in life is with your ego. And it can get rough. Let's consider the ego for a moment. So it was Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, the great psychologists of the early 20th century, that introduced the concept of ego into our culture. Now that word has changed in meaning. Now when I say ego, you think I mean someone that's conceited. Oh, they got a big ego. Or I mean someone that's arrogant, full of themselves. But that's not what ego is in their theory. Ego is just Latin for I. Ego is your personality, your constructed personality and self-definition, who you think you are, and your way of interacting with the world. You do that through your ego, who you are, what you're seeking or hoping for. There's nothing wrong with the ego. However, it can get hold of us in a way that's not good for us, because you're actually far more than your ego. Your ego can get hold of you so firmly that you forget that there is a far deeper dimension to you than your personality or your self-understanding or how you're defined in life. You're a soul. There's a deeper dimension of your consciousness that is far more peaceful and connected to all things, but the ego, it can get hold of you, wrestle you to the ground. Let me describe some ways you can know your ego has hold of you. Have you ever felt a little defensive in life? When someone says something or something happens and you feel you have to defend, whenever you feel that defensiveness welling up in you, it's the ego trying to grab hold. The ego's always worrying about how you stack up, whether people really understand what you're about and respect you. When you start feeling that defensiveness. Or what about when you try especially hard to exert your opinion upon others? So your ego is your personality, your perspectives. Your ego has this subjective take on the world, and in your ego, you actually think you see the world the way it really is, and your opinions about the world are the right ones. That's the ego. I mean, they're my opinions. I like them. I think they're right. And so you start imagining you're the one that sees the world correctly, and your opinions, they're accurate. And so again and again in life, you'll try to exert your take on the world because you're pretty sure yours the right one. It's just the ego trying to exert itself in the world, not understanding that other people might see things very differently, have different opinions. Another way you can tell that your ego is taking hold of you is when you're constantly comparing yourselves to others. Oh, this is an ego dance. It happens all the time. You'll see someone that seems a little smarter than you, and you feel minimized. You see someone that maybe is really good looking, and you feel diminished somehow. Or you see someone that's got it all happening, man. They've got money, they look like they're a success, they look happy. You compare yourself to that, and you don't feel like you measure up. That's the ego taking hold. Oh, there's lots of ways you can tell when the ego is putting you in a hold. For example, almost all of us experience some social anxiety. We just do. And it can be hard. But social anxiety is based in that sense of, what do people think of me? I want to be thought of well. I hope I'm coming across in an impressive way. You see, we think ego is all about people that are really cocky and aggressive. Actually, ego plays out a lot in when we look like we're being humble and retiring, but we're actually really concerned and anxious about what other people think of us. Ego always is in a constant state of wanting. It always wants more. Your ego is always looking for that next thing that will finally fulfill itself, whether it's material things or more money or more relationships or more success. The ego always wants more and more and more. There's no peace with the ego. There's no calm sense that you are just good enough. You always have to strive to be better. I heard a line last week that is just pure wisdom. I don't know who said it. I just heard it somewhere. It said, not wanting something is as good as having it. Let that land for a moment. Not wanting something is as good as having it. If you can get by that endless desire. If I don't want a really beautiful car, it's as good as having that car. You feel just as good. You don't want it. You don't need it. Oh, watch out for the way the ego can take hold. It'll do it in very small ways sometimes. Have you ever noticed when you're anxious, the ego takes hold of you almost always when you're more anxious? Have you ever noticed that when something bad happens to someone you don't like, you get a little bit tinge of pleasure from it? Because the ego thinks when something bad happens to someone else, well, that raises your stock. Do you see what the ego does? It's called Schadenfreude in German. You know about this slight tinge of pleasure at someone else's misfortune. I mean, it's crazy, but that's the ego. Watch out for the ego. Or it can work the other way. You can feel slightly jealous at someone's success because in your ego, you feel like their success minimizes you. Oh, it's so silly, isn't it? It doesn't minimize you one bit. The ego takes hold. You can notice it in very subtle ways when you're in a conversation with someone and you suddenly realize you've talked about yourself for 10 minutes and didn't ask them one question about them. Oh, it's a small thing. But the ego. Do you tend to criticize? This is the ego trying to look better, to look a little superior. Do you tend to criticize, or do you encourage the people around you? Well, watch out for the ego. We're all in a wrestling match with the ego. As I was thinking about that this week, it occurred to me how amazing the Sermon on the Mount is. Jesus' great sermon in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. His great sermon is often read as a blueprint for how we could make society just and how we could make society fair. And it's a social justice manifesto, and it is. But here's what's amazing about our Bible. It can be about social justice. At the same time, it's about your personal flourishing, you coming to your own wholeness, your own peace. And I started to read the Sermon on the Mount as a particular strategy to get beyond your ego. The Sermon on the Mount starts off with, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the persecuted, blessed are the meek." Your ego thinks it's all about a pecking order in life, and Jesus flips over the pecking order, disrupts your sense of ego that, oh, you got it better than others, or you are better than others. Blessed are the poor, the gentle. And then in that sermon, right away it says that you should let your light shine. Wait, that sounds like an ego thing. But listen to what he says. Let your light shine. Let your good works be seen by others to the glory of God. Not about you. Look at this jujitsu he pulls. Oh yeah, let your light shine, but not about you, to the glory of God. The sermon goes on to talk about if you really want to show how faithful you are and pious you are, don't do it in public. Beware of the hypocrites, he says, that pray in the synagogues and make a big show of it. No. Do you remember what he says? Go to a private room. Shut the door. It's a perfectly crafted sermon to get beyond your ego. At one point he says, don't judge others. Quit comparing yourself to others, lest ye be judged. It's trying to loosen the grip of the ego. At the penultimate moment in the Sermon on the Mount, it says, you've heard that you should love your neighbor. I say to you, love your enemies. The ego needs enemies to define itself. You can know your ego is getting out of control when you've got some real enemies, man. You know you're superior to them. You know how bad they are, and because you're so good. Love thine enemies. Oh, this amazing sermon. And then he says, don't worry so much about your life. That's all the ego does. I mean, man, your life, your ego turns it into this construction project, and you're constantly wondering, how am I doing on this project? I mean, it's your life, it's your whole project, and you're constantly trying to measure it. How am I getting along? Am I doing okay? This is a massive project. And Jesus says, don't worry about your life. Look at how God takes care of even the birds. He's trying to calm your ego down. In some way, I think all of religion is trying to point you to that deeper dimension. Because the worst thing about the ego is it could distract you from your true depth. You're not just your ego, your self-understanding of who you are and your personality. You're a soul. And the ego always wants to differentiate from those around us, but it's in John chapter 17 that Jesus says, I pray that we are all one. Everyone one with each other, one with God, one with me. Religion is trying to give you a sense that you are not so separate from one another. We are interconnected in ways beyond our imagination. You have a deeper dimension within you. It's a place of calm. There was a psychologist that said there's two basic modes you will fall into: self-rating or self-acceptance. Self-rating, always comparing yourself and taking measure with others. Where do I rate? Oh man, where do I rate? What's my standing? Self-rating or self-acceptance? That deeper part of yourself that knows you are connected to God, to each other. You are connected to an infinite love. Self-acceptance. It seems to me all of religion is trying to move you from being self-centered to being a centered self. From self-centered to being a centered self. You know who you really are. You're a child of God. You know what your real purpose is: to bring more love into the world. So if we calm our ego down, you'll know all that, and you'll find some interesting ways this very week to be encouraging to someone, to bring more love into this chaotic world. You'll know who you really are. You are God's own.